So by far the most popular question, I think it was asked a dozen times out of out of the 40 questions we received, or 60, a lot of questions, was about the strong-willed child. So people asked it different ways, but I'll read one way that it was asked because I like how it was asked. This person said, "How do you humble the very proud and strong-willed child without breaking his or her spirit?"
Well, I like the way that person asked that question, actually, because remember that we don't want to break their spirit. We want to subdue the will. Mm-hmm. And subdue it. A subdued will is a child that obeys.
Yeah.
Simply obeys. Remember this. This is and we'll go back to a principle here, the main principle. The Bible doesn't distinguish strong will or not. You're either obedient or you're not obedient. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's very simple, right? I mean, it's just, that's the way it is. Now, we understand temperament plays a part, but that means the parent has to have a temperament that says, I'm gonna go ahead and be just as strong-willed, if you will, as the child is, and as,
with follow through.
With follow through, yes, and diligence. But remember this: the Bible only gave one commandment in the garden, and it was that Adam and Eve would not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Right? I mean, they were only bound to one commandment.
Yeah.
They were children in the garden. And likewise, in the New Testament, or where we are today, there's only one commandment, and it was in the Old Testament as well for the child. But the commandment is this in Ephesians 6:1: "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Mm-hmm. You find it in Proverbs, said a similar way. Children, listen to your father. Son, listen to your father. Or hear the instruction. Hear their instruction. So the Bible doesn't give a bunch of requirements other than children obey.
Yeah.
And if they don't obey, then they're not following those guidelines. Now understand, in the Old Testament, the fifth commandment in the Bible, right, was honor your father and mother. Mm-hmm. In fact, it says, honor your father and mother that your days may be long on the earth. Yeah. Which definitely implies that if a child did not honor father and mother in the Old Testament, their days were shortened. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And so we're in the New Testament, obviously, but God is wanting us to prolong their days with wisdom and understanding and having a life, of being blessed. I mean, if a child has self-control, they learn self-control, then they learn to be obedient. If they're obedient, they learn self-control. In fact, that's the first part in our book, right? Mm-hmm. The self-control. Let me say this regarding self-control. A child that learns self-control is an obedient child. Mm. And a child that learns self-control, in fact, if you were to look at any adult, I teach anger management classes at our church, and so the probation services sends them in, juvenile hall, all that. The main problem with an adult that has problem in life is they lack self-control. Yes. They don't know how to get up in the morning at 7 to work on time. They keep hitting the snooze button, and they lose their job. And
it makes a noise on the mic.
And so it's all about self-control. Self-control in the marriage, self-control in life, self-control when the boss gives instructions to do something and they don't want to do it, but they should do it because that exercises self-control. Right.
Yeah. And
so the quicker a child learns to do the things they don't want to do, which is self-control, obey, the quicker they will have success in all areas of their life. And you're teaching them to have success in life. And that success breeds for a Christian that is self-controlled. They know how to get up and pray and read their Bible and be faithful to church on Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Sundays or midweek service and Sundays and be involved and do the things they should be doing, even when they don't feel like it. That's the problem with people who lack self-control. They do what they want to do rather than what they should be doing. Studying requires self-control, right? having a good relationship requires self-control, because it's not about you, it's about us
Right.
now,
Yeah.
right? It's about not just my wants and needs, but yours as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the purpose of, that's the overarching principle behind the other things we'll talk about today regarding discipline and correction and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense? You want to add something, Lee?
Well, I think a strong-willed child is someone who doesn't say yes on the first time, or maybe on the second time,
Sure.
or maybe on the third time.
Yes.
And the point of what you're saying is, this is not a special circumstance. It's just a child who isn't going to take you at your word the first time around. So parental consistency becomes paramount.
Right.
Again,
To set the trajectory for the rest, like the next 15 years of their
Yes.
life, or
Yes.
even
The rest of their
beyond
life.
that.
Yes.
Can I add this while you're saying that? Is that it requires a parent to have self-control.
Yeah.
a lot. of
Exercising self-control so that they develop it. They see it in the parent as well.
When, take a toddler, for instance, because that's where we're starting.
Yeah.
If a toddler says, you say, come to mommy, and she says, no.
This happened, yes.
I watched mommy, who was comfortable in her seat, and take a little sigh and get up. And well, she asked her a second time, come to mommy. And she didn't obey. She took 2 steps forward and then another step backwards, which is exactly what we're talking about.
Yep.
You could see the battle in her little mind, like, she wants me to go to her, but I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And so she has to learn that you don't have that option.
Yeah.
When mommy says, come to me,
Yeah.
that's what it means. So mommy got up, took her out of the room, which we feel is important for dignity's sake.
Let's go there, because that's the next question. So lots of questions about, is spanking okay? So this one person said not abuse, but spanking.
Yes.
And what's the role of spanking in terms of discipline and correction?
The Bible says in Hebrews 12:1, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be grievous, or joyous, seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless afterwards it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. In other words, chastisement is not a bad thing, so you've got to get it out of your head. Sometimes from our own upbringing, it was done out of anger.
It was a beating.
It wasn't.
Yes.
It was abuse.
Yes.
It wasn't correction. It was punitive. It was punishment. And that's a good thing to say right here, is that this is not punishment. You got to get that out of your vocabulary. It's correction. And that correction is to restore relationship. When there's been disobedience, the relationship is breached, right? And so you have to restore relationship. Well, that changes it changes your motive, and it changes your attitude about approaching the child. You're not doing it because you don't chastise because of inconvenience. Many parents do that. I told you for the 15th time.
Yeah.
And now
That's where parental self-control comes in.
Exactly.
You don't wait until the 15th time where you're angry beyond words that how dare she not listen to me. Then it becomes this personal
Offense.
power struggle. Whereas
Totally.
where you know that, no, she's this sweet little precious little chubby cheek face. She is shapen in sin. I mean,
Yep.
she's got iniquity in her, and
Right.
she's trying to figure out, how far can I push this?
Sure.
Which is what the strong-willed child gets up
Yes.
delighted every morning to see, how far can I push my world in my direction. But what you're saying is, you have to have the self-control to say, I love you so much that, and I remember thinking this, I'm exhausted. I have 5 children. 3 of them are in another room. I can have a minute of peace. But you just disobeyed me.
Yeah.
I have to have the self-control and the understanding of principle to get up, deal with you the first time, or the second time, maybe, realistically, and
Can I mention that
discipline.
on the second time, many times it's because we want to make sure that they understood.
Right.
Or heard you.
First, that
Yes.
they heard us, that it was clear to them, there was no misunderstanding, because then it provokes them. Because the Bible says not to provoke your children.
Yeah.
Right? So you're doing things in a way
That's
that
good.
there's understanding.
Yeah, it's a test. It's like, well,
Yes.
did you really
You're-
hear me?
Yes.
Is this rebellion,
Right.
or is this just you simply didn't
Yeah.
hear because you're so focused on playing with
Yes.
your toys?
Or did I not use clear language?
Sure.
Like,
Right.
settle down. We were talking about that
What does
earlier.
that mean?
What does settle down mean to a 2-year-old? That
Sure.
Yes.
she may not understand the terms.
Well, there's passive and active rebellion. Passive could be that they're playing with their toys, and you said it's time for you to pick up your toys and put them in the toy box, and they just keep doing what they're doing. And they heard you, but they are used to you telling them, okay, a second time I'm telling you, or a third time, they're
I'm
just
counting to 5.
Yeah.
I'm counting, and they
If
need
you
to
don't
understand.
do it now, I'm
Yes.
gonna.
But see, passive would be kind of ignoring instructions or doing your own thing. But overt or active rebellion is a different, where you can see it. It's
No.
pouting. No, I'm not going to do
Throwing
it.
a block at you.
And that's that's right in your face. But
Yeah.
the other kind is just as devious.
Yes,
It's just
it is.
as it's disobedience. It's the same
Self-will.
thing. It's
Yeah.
self-will.
It's maybe harder to spot at
It
first.
It can be, yes.
Can I
It can be.
mention this too, real quick on that? This is the layers. This is the steps. These are the steps. It's parent control that leads to self-control that leads to God control. Because ultimately we want to be submitted to our Father in
That's
heaven, but the parent has been given stewardship of that child to eventually that child turns his affections or her affections to the Father, to God. And there's been a good relationship between mom and dad. Repentance is accepted. They understand that there's consequences to sin, and they can come to God and ask forgiveness, and they understand that there's forgiveness because they've been trained that way in a home where there's this kind of thing
It's
going
been
on.
modeled to them every time you have to take them into the room.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and we go through it in our book, we go through the steps that we
Yes.
feel take you from acknowledging the wrong, the chastisement, the time to repent, and then the reconciliation. We never allowed ourselves or our children to walk out of the room without knowing our relationship had been restored.
Yep.
Because if there was still anger in your heart or in my heart, then we weren't restored. And again, we're trying to give them skills for life, principles in life to know that if I've violated relationship with my wife or with my father, then I know how to repair it.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
it's so
Yeah.
vital.
And I will mention that without chastisement, the Bible says in Hebrews 12:8 that without chastisement, whereof all are partakers. The Bible says if we're children of His, then we all are part of this chastisement. We're corrected with chastisement. It says, if you're without it, though, if you're without chastisement, then you're bastards. You have no father. And that's strong language. And it says, and it finishes with, and you're not sons. So we're sons and daughters by virtue of chastisement. So that's why it's important for us to understand that if somebody's asking, do you chastise? Yes. But we do it with this in mind, that we're restoring relationship. We're not doing it because they offended us. We're not doing it to punish them. We're doing it to restore the relationship. We're doing it to teach them self-control and to overcome their own will that says, I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
Rather than God's way, rather than your way, because you're really, until they understand that,
Ambassadors.
you're God to them. When they're 2 years old, they don't understand an abstract father. They will as they grow older understand. But you have been given stewardship of that child or those children by God, and really you've been leased these children.
Yeah.
That's a
You
good
know,
way to
You're
put
God's
it.
ambassador.
You're God's
Yes.
ambassador.
Absolutely.
And so the ambassador area is that you're just carrying out God's instructions. You don't have to be offended by it. You don't have to be upset or angered by it. Listen, they've disobeyed, and it's clear that they disobeyed. You've made sure did you fully hear me, son or honey? I asked you to do this. Did you understand me? And then we'd say, we understand by a cheerful, yes, sir, or no, sir, yes, ma'am. You can do it whatever.
That's
yes,
how
Mom.
we got around the did you hear me or not. One of our standards, general standards, was we'll speak, this is one of them too, I think, calmly, and if we just go from beginning to end on a situation, calmly and clearly one time. If we we train ourselves into the habit of, I'm going to say it, then I'm going to say it, I'm going to raise my voice a little bit and say it, and then I'm going to say it.
And then I'm going to count.
And then, then they know, oh, cool, she's just said it.
I have some buffer.
I've got 3 more times.
That's true.
So our standard for ourselves was, and for you, was
What?
we will speak calmly, and you knew that. So if I was calm, I was violating. We kind of put ourselves on the line to tell you that this is our standard. We have to remain calm and clear, making sure for me that what I'm asking you is obvious.
Yeah.
One time.
Yeah.
Now I'm on the hook again.
Yeah.
And now your responsibility as a child is, I'll know you hear and understand me by a cheerful, now some disagree, but we would say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. And I'll just take a little second to say that everywhere we went, people would comment, oh my goodness, your children are so well behaved. They're so wonderful. They're so mannerly. How did you do this? And so much of it was just, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir.
Sure.
And people say, yes, daddy. I don't like that ma'am thing or that sir thing. And that's your prerogative
Yes,
as a
Daddy.
parent. We would say,
Yes,
yes,
Mommy.
daddy, yes, mommy. But we required a response. And if we didn't get the response, maybe you were just so into your Legos that,
Those are important.
which is often very much the case. Then I say, Adam, it's time to take out the trash. Adam, listen to mommy. Hey, it's time to take out the trash.
Yeah.
Yes, mommy. Then I knew you heard me.
Yeah.
So if you don't do it, you're being
Right.
rebellious.
Yeah.
So that's when we deal with
It
it.
just makes it so much more clear
Absolutely.
and takes away the ambiguity of like, oh,
Yeah.
did they hear me? Did they not hear me? What do I do in this situation?
Yes.
And you've already set because I think one of the biggest difficulties with this sort of training is if you haven't set down this roadmap, this guidance, you're in the heat of the moment. You're looking into their beautiful eyes. Maybe there's manipulation. Maybe they're just like
In front of people.
Yeah, in front of people, you get
or
flustered.
you're on Instagram and you don't want to be worried right,
Right.
now with it. There's so many.
A lot of distractions to
Yeah.
parenting
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to be disciplined yourself and diligent about it, because this is important business.
You're an
Because
ambassador
the Bible says this.
for the Lord.
The Bible says this in 3 John 4, I have no greater joy than to hear my children walk in truth. And the way they walk in truth eventually is that they've learned self-control. They've learned faithfulness because you're doing what you know. Does everyone hearing me enjoy a midweek service every week? They cannot wait to get out. You've got 3 children to get ready, and it's been a long day, and you've got all these other distractions and things going on. But you have to overcome that and say, no, we need to go to church. In fact, if there's any time I really need it, it's today. Right now,
Sure.
things have just come unglued. And so
When I at least feel like
parents learning self-control, you're learning self-control, the child's learning self-control, and they're doing what they know is their responsible thing to do. We're teaching them to be wise and responsible later on as well.
That's the goal.
That's the
Exactly.
goal, is to
Absolutely.
train them up to maturity. In fact, train up a child, training them to maturity is the goal. You want mature children. You don't want to keep, it would be weird to see, Brother Wilson used to preach and he'd say, it'd be a weird thing to see a 21-year-old in a diaper and sucking on a bottle, right? But we do have a lot of teenagers that are still they're toddlers
Theoretically.
emotionally, and
Yes.
toddlers because they haven't been taught self-control. I want to address this really quick before we forget.
Yeah.
Somebody said something about timeout.
Mm-hmm.
It's timeout.
Yeah.
There's probably times where they need to think about their infraction. The things that they've done. Or there may be an appropriate time for a timeout. And I would kind of leave that up to the parent. But whenever there's disobedience, the Bible doesn't say anything about timeout. The Bible talks about chastisement.
Yeah.
And so, we also want to, as we're parenting in the funnel,
Yep.
it's narrowly restricted when they're really young, and then we're giving them more and more liberties as they get older and freedoms. But with freedom is responsibility.
Yeah.
And so timeout, as a parent, it's not used for rebellion. It's not used for outright disobedience or passive. But there's a time when it'd probably be a good time to have some discipline in your room and sit quietly and play with your Legos, or whatever.
Yeah. So you're saying that, like you said, the parenting in the funnel, at first, because we did start with talking about toddlers. So it'd be weird for a 16-year-old to get a spanking.
I was just going to say going to age. In fact, I wrote down age.
Yeah.
That's going to be, there's no absolute number on when you stop chastisement. It could be 8, it could be 7, it could be, in that range, maybe 8, possibly 9. And it gets a little older, I think, that then you run the risk of provoking your children, which the Bible is very clear that we're not to provoke our children to wrath, but raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So
it's difficult to put a number on it.
It is. And as a parent, you're considering these things, and anybody viewing this is, you're the kind of people that are conscientious and wanting to do things right. God's going to help you with that. Your child better than we do. We spend time with we knew them really well because we spent time with them and understanding their emotional intelligence, their maturity and age and everything. And so I hope that was clear. It probably wasn't real clear. You'd probably like a real direct absolute answer, but
that's difficult.
That's difficult, and each child is different.
Yeah. And one question that kind of pops in my head, and some people are probably thinking this, like maybe they haven't been very regimented in their discipline. How long does it take to start seeing change in the family? I know this is not a direct answer either, but maybe they're 4 or 5, they haven't been, or even less. And how long does it take to start seeing
Like if
change?
they're going to implement new...
Yeah, like, okay, we really need to change
Not
things.
long.
3 days.
Yeah.
I'll give you a number that way because I think, and it could be 5 days, but it's not long if you're consistent with doing these things.
And set your expectations.
Set your expectations
Yeah.
and agree, as if you may be a single parent doing this and you're not, that's where you are, and that can eliminate also a blended situation or disagreement in the family. So there's going to be agreement. Obviously, you're going to make the standards and the rules in the home, and but for mom and dad, you have to be in agreement. If my wife even was, I don't know, maybe she said something that I disagreed with, or corrected the children, or said something to them that I disagreed with, I would never disagree with her in front of the children.
I think this touches on a couple of questions here.
Yes.
Can,
okay.
Can I add to what you said about answering
Yes.
specifically your question? I think that if you're implementing something new, or you say, wow, we really need to tighten up the ship, my best advice would be sit down beforehand, have a summit, write some things down, make it simple, make it 3 or 4 things, and then clear your calendar. Spend a few days just like potty training. Potty training, everything else kind of goes on the side because we're focusing on this one habit. It's the same thing with having more self-control or working on self-control or discipline. Set up some situations. We used to practice without your knowledge. We would practice. We would say, I noticed that they're not answering as quickly or whatever. So we would let our children get into their Legos, or as toddlers, wait until they're very distracted and then say, Adam, sorry.
Life practice, right?
Yeah. We called it booty camp.
Booty camp.
Like baby booties. Come to me. And know you're in the thick middle. The baby's a distractor. The child is
and they
distracted.
don't want to.
Yeah. We would look for ways to implement these new skills in a very concerted time. The time not to train, as we were talking about earlier, you don't get frustrated about your child's table manners at the restaurant if you haven't worked on table manners at home.
Yeah.
So we would, whatever it was, overarchingly, we went through life and said, what do good, mature people need to be successful adults? Table manners are really important.
Yep.
That can ruin a business deal.
Yeah.
So we wanted to say, what can we teach them or train them? Some people don't like that word, but how can we train them at home for success out?
Yes.
So we did train at home. We had table standards where we worked at how to eat nicely and to be respectful and to be thoughtful.
A related
I remember that
question.
one. Okay, so pause because this brings up a hilarious story.
I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, I remember it. They sat us all down. I think we were all present. I think we had all 5 kids, right?
Yeah.
And so we were all sitting at the dining room table, and my parents made this beautiful, I remember having a lot of food. We're like, it was the end of the day. We were super hungry. I remember that. And then my dad's like, hey, would you pass me a roll? And Mom's like, and throws it across. And all of us, we had table training before this. And, flying through the air, there's a, bread roll, and Mom, Dad just making a mess with his food. And I remember us kids sitting there going, what's going on? They've lost their mind. And you guys just made a mess of it.
They were animals.
They were animals. And they
say all the things we did.
Yeah. It was so hilarious. I still remember this. And I was pretty young. And so you took that opportunity,
we were making the point.
Yeah.
You were making the point that
Clearly you made an impact because I still remember.
maybe this isn't the right way to eat at the table.
Yes.
Yeah, that was fun.
And it was a great jumping off point for saying, wow, that was really gross.
Yeah.
How do we eat right, or how do we do well?
Yes.
The same thing for going to the grocery store. We'd talk about it.
You wanted potatoes, and I picked up a spoonful of potatoes and I threw it. I flopped it in.
It was pretty extreme.
Please pass me instead of passing.
And so that all to say, we made it fun. This was not drudgery.
Yeah.
This was joyful because
it wasn't an iron rule.
No.
Yeah.
And which this is not but this brings to mind, as much as we chastised, we loved. As much as we corrected,
that was in
we
love,
hugged
though, as well.
Well, absolutely,
Yes.
100%. We were not. If we were personally, if we were angry, we would say, like we talked about earlier, go to your room and sit there. I'll be there in a minute, because we didn't ever want to go in and spank you or even talk to you out of anger.
Sure.
We needed to be self-controlled.
Right. So you're never chasing us around with a belt in your hand, like,
No, we didn't throw hangers or scissors or anything like that. But on the other hand, someone used a term, and we loved it so much. We worked to tie strings of fellowship. We worked to
Friendship.
tie ourselves
Yeah.
together in love.
That's good.
Reading books, donut dates,
Yeah.
big things, little things, weekly things, daily things. Just that looking into their
Yes.
eyes and knowing,
That's good.
I love you. And that, one of those things when I say looking into your soul, one of the things that meant was, are we connected? Did anything that happened today put a cloud between our love for one another?
That's good.
And that was so, so important.
Yeah.
Sometimes we had to go back and say, honey, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
There was the humility in us. We would never ask of you something that we couldn't do ourselves.
Right.
Right.
And one of those things is saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Saying, man,
Yeah.
mommy did not handle that right. I am,
Sure.
please forgive me.
Yeah.
And just that relationship, overall relationship.
Something I saw modeled by you guys that I thought was really good too is that whenever you guys got in a little like disagreement in front of us, which is never heated or whatever, like, but that happens.
Yeah.
It was never crazy, but sometimes, you know, you guys said something and I remember I remember a specific couple times, you know, in the car generally, right? One of you guys would look back and say, you know, guys, I'm really sorry for the way I spoke to your mom there, or how I said that. You know, it wasn't right. And you guys were very quick to apologize for anything that we could have seen that wasn't loving toward each other. And I thought that was a really good example because it shows that you guys are humble, that you guys are trying to be what you need to be.
Yes.
And it sets up a model of nobody's perfect.
Striving, not perfection.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That I mess up
That's good.
and so do you. You know, like it was kind of like we're all striving toward the mark.
Absolutely.
So that was a really, like, it shows humility, it shows being teachable, it shows a lot of good elements of parenting and marriage there.
For sure.
Children, you can tell them as much as you want, this is what you need to be. But if I'm not being that,
Yeah.
I am undermining everything I'm teaching them,
Right.
including look to God.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's a very, very sobering thought.
Right.
Yeah.
We're trying to model dependence on the Lord and being
Right.
humble and
Yeah.
That's really good.
repentant.
Any other things that we didn't cover? I mean, okay. We haven't covered a lot. Is there anything that you would like to add to what we've already said, or something that you, maybe a comment?
Well, I think in this area that we're talking about,
The
children,
toddlers and
Yeah.
is that we wrote down a few notes just before we got together, but something that I wanted to make clear is that children thrive. They grow healthy and wise and confident and secure when there are clear boundaries and lines in their life. And they're insecure otherwise.
Yeah.
I remember, in fact, I think it's in our book, we wrote about it. We talked about, it was a sociology study I'd written, and I can't cite it for you right now, but it was a sociology study I'd read about where this public school, the sociologists observed how children would come out of their classroom and they would, for playtime, and there was a cyclone fence, a 6-foot cyclone fence around the play yard, and they observed how they would come out and they would play. I mean, they would disperse like almost all the way out to the perimeter of the fence and all the way around. They would just play and have fun and secure and laugh, and the play yard sounds. And over a weekend, they took down the cyclone fence, and they observed how the children, when they come out of the classroom, when they went out to play, they didn't do that same thing. Wow. They huddled closer to the classroom. When they realized there was the boundary, the lines were taken down, the safety was taken down, they stayed farther in toward the classroom. They weren't as secure as going.
They weren't as
out.
Vibrant in their play.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was insecurity. So I mean, it was just a snapshot, really, of creating. And when we say create boundaries and lines for security, that's where agreement That's where that's where standards that are written down. And you know what we can do maybe at the end, we can put the 10 standards that we have in our book that you can modify those, play with them, look at them. I mean, you probably have questions, and we just recommend. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but we'll include those at the end, so you can get those, and then you can again make your own standards. But written standard. Listen, God gave us standards. He wrote down. He gave us 66 books. He gave us 31,000 plus verses. He gave us all of these lines, these boundaries, and it creates for a secure Christian.
Yeah.
A believer.
Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted to say about that.
I love that.
And understand that with toddlers and young ones, the will is still the main issue.
Mm-hmm.
Subduing the will, not breaking the spirit, but subduing the will, because the will has to say, not my will.
Yeah.
That's why God showed it on the cross. Not my will, but thy will be done. In that prayer before he went and died for mankind. So we're having to deal with the will.
Yeah.
Okay?
We still are, right?
Yes.
It's a constant parallel to our walk with the Lord
Yes.
as adults.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. And the last thing that I wanted to say before we moved on, and maybe we'll touch on it again, I don't know, but don't chastise for childish irresponsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Don't chastise for misunderstanding.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a childish irresponsibility. What would
We were
that
You
be?
said
talking about-
spilled something.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
there you go.
if a child is
Hyper.
not sitting still at the table and kind of monkeying around and messing around
Spills milk
and they knock the milk over.
The almond milk.
The almond milk.
Yeah.
Or regular milk.
Regular milk.
Now, it might have been that they weren't obeying you but that's still a childish irresponsibility. Children spill
Sure.
milk, children have accidents like we all do, and we just
I
want
think what we were talking about earlier was if a child is at the table and you've said, sit still in your chair and eat your food, and they keep jiggling around and messing around and spill their milk. Well, we wouldn't chastise them for spilling their milk.
right
It's the
that they
sitting still part.
So if there was a set standard, we sit at the table,
Mm-hmm.
we don't jiggle around and stand up on the chair and
Right.
throw
Right.
things.
Right.
So if they're standing up on the chair and throwing things, then they are in...
They're violating the
standard.
center,
Yeah.
the rule.
Yeah.
And
Right.
again, that they're clear on that. You know what I mean? And usually, after you've trained them, you've taught them that this is inappropriate behavior, then you know when they know when they violated it. 'Cause
Yeah.
only I'm going to look at everybody that's viewing this. You know when your child is doing something, and they know that they're violating your standards and guidelines in the home.
Yeah.
You know by their facial expression. You know by the way they their aloof look. They're looking off and they're doing their own thing. As a parent, you're wise and you know your child. So.
But there's also times when they are just being a kid.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're just running and they're playing and they
Yeah.
accidentally break something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that's
don't
just-
spank
no,
them
Right.
for breaking something in the course of just being a
Right.
child, and you can generally
Yes.
tell the difference. If you do, I would say examine your heart, because what you're doing is you're taking out your anger
Right.
Yeah.
at them, and that's
Yeah.
Not okay.
that's not okay. That's just
When-
the wrong motivation.
And you know what? When things are done out of anger and the wrong motivation, it's not chastisement; it's abuse.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll just be frank with you on that. And so we need to be clear. And if there's ever a time that we feel like we might have crossed the line, then we need to apologize to them.
Yeah.
Humble ourselves to I probably said to Adam 1,000 times, son, I'm so sorry.
Maybe not 1,000.
Dad, well, but many times as you're growing
Absolutely.
up,
Yeah.
son, maybe I was harsh in
I was
my
a little
tone.
bit strong.
I was strong
Yeah.
in my tone, all right? Or maybe I was a little more, I was frustrated with
Yeah.
you when I should have, whatever. And it might not even have been chastised, just our conversation.
Absolutely.
And you knew I was being harsh in my tone or whatever. And I just wanted our relationship, like my wife said earlier, we want to we want to tie cords. You know that
Yeah.
old song. What is it?
Bind us
Bind us
together.
together with cords of love.
Cannot
Well,
be broken.
the thing
Yeah.
is we're when we do those acts of love and we do things right and our motivations are right, we're actually tying those cords. We're wrapping those cords around us in love.
Right.
But if we're inappropriate and we do things harshly and in the wrong motivation, we're cutting those cords.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're separating us in
Yeah,
relationships.
I think just working in the school district for a while, a lot of the disobedience we see is really attention seeking.
Yes.
They want to
Yes.
get your attention.
Yes.
So
Yes.
sometimes just being, like you said, like being a father and going for donut dates,
Yeah.
doing things together, going fishing, camping, like knowing that, my dad, my mom love me. We have a good time together.
Yes.
I remember reading almost a lot of the weeknights. We would read together and play Legos, and that was a really awesome time. G. Henty
Did
and
you
Barrack the
know,
Briton, and
while we were doing that, we were actually also training
yeah,
Yeah.
self-control.
Yeah.
Sit and listen while we read.
yeah. And I still go back to those times as good times.
Yeah,
So-
it didn't hurt.
Right. So
Yeah.
so all of that together, like, I get enough of you time, and I know where the lines are. It is a place that you could flourish.
Absolutely.
It's a place that children can express themselves and become creative.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a formula that we picked up somewhere along the line that we would go back to when we saw misbehavior or we saw someone that was acting not themselves or acting up, acting out, whatever, like the kids
This
at
is
school.
good.
We would say, see it, it's encouraged. So if we were seeing a behavior that was growing or not appropriate, we would say, okay, I'm seeing this happen. How are we encouraging this? Are we doing anything?
Yeah.
For example, hey, mom,
Don't yell.
yeah. and I realized, wait a minute, I'm tuned out.
Sure.
Yes.
So if somehow, what am I doing anything? Am I not
That's
listening?
really good.
Am I not following through?
So good.
Sure.
If I said come to mommy, but I'm distracted, and I realized, man, they're not listening to me. Well, man, maybe I'm not following through, or maybe I'm distracted, like
Yep.
we said.
Yep.
So see it, it's encouraged. Examine our own actions. Are we inadvertently encouraging bad behavior?
Yeah.
And then the other one was encourage it, see it. So
You encourage
if we encourage a right behavior,
Yeah.
you'll see
we're
more
going to
of it.
see it again. When
Yeah,
we
that's really good.
applaud,
Yeah.
when you brought your plate to the sink without being reminded, boy, it was like woo!
Yeah, it's celebrated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would sell even the littlest things. Putting away a toy when you're done with it, whatever it was. If it was something that we wanted to keep seeing and you did it,
Yeah.
then we would encourage and we would celebrate it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's focused on grows or increases. I've heard that. Like if you focus on the good
Yes.
things, it's not just focusing on the bad things
Absolutely.
or the discipline aspect. That's important, but
Yes.
also just as important, let's praise, let's celebrate.
Look for the good and
Good.
praise it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you.
You know, one other thing to mention, and this could maybe bring up another conversation on all this, but all rules and no relationship makes for rebellion.
Yeah.
But at the
This
same
is-
time, the tension to that is all relationship and no rules leads to chaos.
Yeah.
So, you don't want a chaotic home, but you also don't want to set up somebody for failure and rebellion by it's all rigid rules, there's no relationship building, it's
Never any
it's
approval.
stifling, no approval. And again, we have to look to ourselves and there's no magic formula, I guess, for what that looks like in the home, other than it's going to be a healthy home if there's a good balance between the rules, the standards in the home, and the relationships that are built by them and for them.
Right.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're doing this in order to build relationship. Boy, I got to say that again. You're creating those standards and those rules, in order to have the relationships that are so necessary for a vital, healthy home.